All right. Well, Randy, thank you so much for coming in and doing this. We've been thinking about doing this now for maybe 2 months. I believe we were outside in a table in Greenwich talking about getting you on the podcast, which is a tremendous honor. So I just wanted to thank you
for that, but I have no recollection or concept who you are or what this is.
Okay, so let's reinvigorate the memory then.
Or you can rewind if you want. Just had to say that.
I was the guy who made sure you got on camera and ran as smoothly as possible that frigid night in a garage in Greenwich.
Oh my God, you were involved in that?
I was involved last minute, yeah.
I'm out of
save
here.
you. Well, you should be.
What was that anyway?
That was really a last-ditch effort for me to make sure that you were as comfortable as possible.
No. What was the whole thing?
Well, the whole thing was a scheduled film shoot. By the way, I wasn't part of that form. I wasn't. But
it's okay.
I cared for you so much, Randy. I wanted to be sure you were taken care of.
I do remember.
Yeah.
I do remember now. You were like the only sane person to say of that event. And I would say that in front of Nino or Frankie or so or anybody.
Yeah.
Like I do remember you.
Yeah.
I remember saying, this is a good guy. A nice young guy. What's he doing around here?
Well, thank you so much.
Okay,
I'm glad
go ahead.
now that we're on the same page. But, it's been, I think that was shot maybe October of last year. And we sat down in a round table, 100 under a heat lamp, talking about how I wanted to get you on the podcast. And thank you so much, Eileen, for setting this up. It means the world to us as well.
If it wasn't for Eileen, believe me.
Oh, man, the world would fall apart.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
She's the best.
She's the best. Yeah, exactly. There we go.
So, I'd love to just really learn more about your story because you really resemble this kind of monolithic artist personality to me, where you're just so incredibly talented in your own right. It's interesting how you've been involved in all these different parts of different genres of music, different markets in music, going through different generations of history. And, I really want to focus in on your relationship to your piano specifically.
Well, had you missed your opportunity for all of this primo last night.
Well, I've seen you perform twice.
Not last night.
Really? Tell me about that. How'd the show go?
Well, it would have answered all these questions.
Oh, really? Okay, so then we wouldn't have to do the pod.
I feel like I'm repeating last night now. When you could have been there, man, it was like insanely great.
Well, let's talk about it. You were performing where at this time? I've seen you at the Roomy Theater, and I've seen you perform at what was the hotel we were at where you were on recording? Hey George, can you make sure that door's closed?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't appear that much, but this was in a place called the Chelsea, which is a beautiful place. It's really, I'm hoping that they are really successful because they deserve to be. They have all the the sound and everything is under control and really good people. So anyway, but I really I did almost 2 hours of everything.
Really?
Lots of the film stuff and songs from the very beginning. And what it became and what it's become, it's really a musical. It's the musical that I live like every day. Because this music is music that has accompanied every part of my life, after, from the time I was 18 or 19. Not purposely,
right.
But you write music, it has to do with whatever you're doing. So that's what this particular concept, it wasn't developed as a concept. I was doing songs or doing films, but it's really turned out to that, to be that. And it's really kind of interesting because every song, there's a story.
Mm-hmm.
Very few songs are just, I just wrote this. There's a story. And then because so many people recorded the songs, there's a great after story to those few songs, which I'm able to look back on now after 25 years of never caring or wanting to be involved with songwriting once I got into the kind of pressurized world of film scoring. It's not that I didn't want to, it's just that I had a bigger challenge, and musically it was much more rewarding for me. But now it's different. And I can look back on those things and say, wow, how did that happen? I know exactly how it happened.
Right.
These little things. And people seem to really respond to these. They're not stories. They're events that happened that enabled certain things to happen. They're not like, I wrote this and it became a #1 record. It's not like that. It's better than that, though.
Huh. Well, you got your start in pit orchestras on Broadway, right?
Not really, no.
No?
I played in 1 or 2 shows. But my start was in being a traditional classical serious musician and going to a very serious music conservatory where I somehow made a strange connection with a place called King Records. King Records was in Cincinnati, Ohio. They had a studio located basically in a garbage dump. And I would bring kids from the school to play orchestral strings and stuff, overdubbed over the King Records artists. King Records artists were Bobby Blue Bland and someone by the name of James Brown. An odd place. And so I started getting involved in that.
Yeah.
And by the time I got out of that school,
this was for your doctorate.
No.
No, that wasn't in Cincinnati.
No. That was like yesterday.
Okay.
That was an honorary doctorate. Okay. No. This is when I was a kid. Well, I was a kid. It was for whatever the bachelor's degree of music was. And so I had a little kind of change up and I was always interested in pop music and show music, not so much jazz. So it's not like there weren't things in my head, but I kind of got some odd experience there, which led me to having different ideas in my head as to what I may be able to do with the only thing I never thought about being a songwriter,
right,
let alone a lyricist or a film composer. I had no interest in that. I was a schooled, technically trained, really good musician. So where it was going to take me, I wasn't sure. But I had a good background and kind of the soul, obviously, to do these things when confronted, whether it was playing in the pit of a Broadway show or coming up with a song when I wasn't a songwriter.
So how much of that was informed by maybe the music business market or interests? Did you find yourself falling into these new markets, a singer-songwriter and then film scoring, or was it a conscious choice? How did that
film scoring, you don't fall in, there's no falling in.
Oh.
That's, you can decide something, but you're not going to get into it. That's another thing that took a long time, even though I wasn't pursuing it. Now, the songwriting thing you're asking about, right at the time when I came to New York, is not right at that time, but the music business had made a big change in the years before that. It went from being a music publisher, taking a song to a record producer who had a number of artists on his roster at the record label he was with, and then he'd say, I like that song, and take it to the artist, and the artist would record the song. Well, obviously, long before that, Beatles, Bob Dylan, Eagles, the vast majority of the records really selling, was now people who wrote and produced their own records. That completely changed the music business. It was done. It was done. Now, was there a Barbra Streisand here or a person there still recording for a while who did outside songs? Yeah, that went on for a while and maybe still goes on. But as far as the excitement and the new creative people, whether you liked it or not, of whether it was rock and roll or R&B, were the people. Elvis Presley wasn't. That was the end of something because he didn't record his own songs. So that was the end of that. But then Beatles, Bob Dylan, other people, then Carole King, Elton John, all those kind of people. So the business had changed.
Right.
So that's when I came to New York, and suddenly, at about the same time as I was playing in the pit, which I thought was the greatest thing in the world on Broadway, and for a kid, that's a prime union gig.
Right.
There's 8 billion great pianists in New York trying to get a union gig. They don't really exist anymore because the orchestras are smaller and synthesizers and everything. But I started hearing these records, and when I was a kid, the thing about hearing music on the radio wasn't so much the songs. It's just I would put my ear to the speaker. I was listening to what's going on, the arrangement, the string parts, the background singers. Who is that in the background? Are they a better singer than the actual singer? This kind of crazy stuff. But I was
You're clocking it, yeah.
into that. That was really interesting to me, not just the song. So when I am at the period I'm talking about, I would hear these albums. I'd hear like this Elton John album, and I'd hear these string arrangements. Nothing to do with Elton John. The songs were great. But there was a guy named Paul Buckmaster who would write string parts. James Taylor's first album, not Sweet Baby Jane's, the album he did in England for Paul McCartney for Apple Records. Same thing. So I got very turned on to a certain, there's others, but I remember getting turned on. That kind of stuff made me interested in the recording aspect, because I suddenly saw maybe a role for me as a serious musician writing arrangements. So then we come to the big change. Okay? It's the end of the Vietnam War. It's basically over. But there's still, you're throwing things in the lottery. I told my father, I put my name in there. He said, "You're fucking crazy." But that's going on. And at the same time, I had this girlfriend who would come with me from Cincinnati and dump me. Real tragic story. I'm talking serious stuff. Yeah. People said, "You got to go to this place called the Payne Whitney. It's an institution," because but I didn't know anything about depression or pills or psychiatry, and I couldn't afford it anyway. Okay, but why am I telling you this? Because there's a combination of things that happened. And I was just walking around the streets in the cold, not far from here, just saying, "Oh, what am I going to do? I don't have a job. I may be drafted. I just got dumped, blah, 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 blah." So what happens? It's the old cliche, one door closes, another one opens.
Right.
And I started writing this really sad stuff. But I was writing and writing words, which I never did. So I had a little publishing thing going. I won't get into that story, of which I just told her a little part of. And I'm suddenly doing that. Now I'm really turned on by all these singer-songwriters who were happening at the time. And, I'm writing these songs, and suddenly it's like, bing, guess what? You can do an album. Well, in order to do an album, especially those days, it wasn't like the technology, go into your house and have a setup.
Right.
You got to get a record deal. You know what I mean? Now, at that time, I always say, it's an over-exaggeration, but if you could write a good melody and carry a tune, you may be able to get a record deal at that time. Granted, an over-exaggeration. And as I'm writing these songs, there's a lot of these terribly sad songs, but also I kind of started getting hip, I opened with a song that's the first song I recorded in my first album last night. It's called "The Farmer." It sounds like I'm going to do music about dirt. And I remember when I did a concert, there was a reviewer that said, "Here's a guy comes up, no one knows, he starts talking about soil." No, seriously. But the point I'm trying to make is I started, now obviously I was writing about something.
Right.
But kind of more interesting stuff, not as commercial or as sad as an obvious love song. My girlfriend dumped me, I'm going to kill myself. So eventually I, of course, signed the proverbial, 100-page record deal without looking at it or reading it or showing it to cousin Jules, the family lawyer who about killed me, and with a little record company. And all I wanted to do was get in there and do this album and have my picture on the cover. And the next day I was going to be Elton John. You know, I mean, that's what you think. You maybe don't think that, but that's what you aspire to.
Of course.
So make a long story short, that's how I got going. And even though no one ever really heard the album, in retrospect, I would have never believed what happened to some of the songs and the people who recorded it. But that stuff evolves. And that's happened with a lot of my stuff. And then I eventually, or quickly, went out to California and did a second album also, which no one ever heard of. However, as I mentioned last night, again, always has to be a story. So nobody was selling records who was not, I mean, big time records, who didn't do their own stuff. There were a few. And one of them was people doing music that was diametrically opposed to anything that was happening, you know. And it was a brother and sister act. Crazy thing. From Connecticut or something, who moved to LA. And they were suddenly like the hottest thing going. Somehow, won't get into it, the sister played the drums and sang. The brother was a really, really good piano player, arranger. And they heard my first album. And the brother, like, completely responded, not just to the songs, he responded to my playing. Wow. You know, really responded to it. And so I met them. And they not only were going to record a couple of the songs, that was a big deal, but they called me and said, we're going to take you on tour. You're going to open for us. Now, I had never opened for anybody.
Yeah.
I hadn't sung for my mother. I had nothing. All I had done was written and sung the 10 songs on that album. Right. Now, these people were big. They weren't playing concerts at Carnegie Hall. They were playing Madison Square Garden, you know, athletic places. So their name was the Carpenters. And they were up there. They were just, you know, big, huge hits. You know? Yeah. So we went to the first concert, and it's like a big deal. I played 2 places. One was called the Inner Ear Club in Palo Alto.
That's an amazing name.
But you see, in Palo Alto is a great big school, best school, Stanford University.
Yep.
However, when I was booked into the Inner Ear Club, which was sort of on the campus, they had a semester system. The school was not open. You know what I mean? It opened maybe 2 weeks later. So the only people that were at this Inner Ear Club, as you can imagine, there would never be many people, were the waiters.
Oh, wow.
So I broke in there, and then I did one other small place called Marvelous Mars in Denver, where I opened for Jackie.
Jackie,
Jackie DeShannon, my wife. Wasn't my wife at the time.
Right.
And she allowed me. I needed to do something. Because like the next week, I was in front of 15,000 people. It didn't help because you can't prepare for something.
Right, I'm sure.
In fact, the Inner Ear Club and the Marvelous Mars were much harder than that. Because when you do something like I did,
right,
there's the people are out there. The stage is far away. There's no interaction.
More in a bubble, right.
Especially when nobody knows who you are. So you just go out, you say, you have to do 30 minutes contractually or 40, and you set your watch and you go. So the first concert, so we go there. I go on the plane. It's just the pilot and the co-pilot and Richard and Garen. These 2 kids, they were literally my age. They weren't, they had all this stuff happen, but they were kind of naive and, and me. And they had another plane with the rest of the people. I mean, this is like craziness. I mean, for them, I'm sure, it was like, holy. So we get to the first thing, and I'm like, go to the place, which is not a place, it's where they, Brigham Young, where they play the basketball games, and ice, all that shit. And so it comes to the concert time, and there's a guy gets up there. It's a Mormon place. This priest gets up there, and he makes like a benediction. Oh, and now there's this Jewish kid from New Jersey, right. Never done anything. He's about to walk out and be like, well, they're going to kill me. And so he says, ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest musical event in the history of the state of Utah.
Wow.
Okay. It doesn't matter to me. The whole thing is completely, I must be dreaming,
Right.
And so I go out there. I sit down to do the only thing I know, the 10 songs on that album. Maybe I did 8 of them. Or that, I don't think that filled out the time that I was supposed to do, because they weren't that long, but that's what I was doing. Mm. And I didn't have any clothes, as I still don't. And I had gone out and bought what I thought was something cool. This very kind of expensive turtleneck sweater, okay? With purple corduroy pants.
Nice.
Now, and you'd say, well, what about the next night? No, this was my outfit. Right. I went all out. I went to wherever it was, paid the money, and bought the turtleneck. So now I'm out there, right? Now, when you're playing an event like that, it's not with a group like that that's at their height, they have the top sound and lighting companies, just like the Rolling Stones.
Right.
So when you walk out there and those lights hit you, it is hot. So now I start playing. Like I said, you're not really that scared because they don't know who I am. I'm not really communicating with anybody, these songs. You know what I mean? I'm not saying like it's a sad song and I'm going to pick somebody in the audience and I'm just saying, no, couldn't even see anybody. Yeah. I didn't know where I was. Could have been on the moon. But what happened is, as I kept going along, the sweat I was drenched. And the piano keys, there were no keys. It was a river of water.
Oh, that's so gross.
Okay, I'll stop there. That was that. And that was, and then, postscript.
Yeah.
So won't get into anything more except so I do a couple of these shows, and now, like anything else, by the 4th or 5th one, is nothing. Easy.
Do you have a preference in terms of performing for smaller groups where you feel a little more connection on an individual level, or being in that almost rock star bubble?
Well, I was only in the rock star bubble, except for a couple of concerts in England where I did do, really large halls. When I had my own hit singles, the only place I ever had hit singles as an artist was in the UK. And that was great. That was, because you got an audience communicating. No, and I don't do it that often. But when you do it at a smaller place, and if you don't do it on a regular basis, it's always and you're not a performer, right? Because you got to speak, you got to keep their attention. So it's much harder to do an intimate place. The postscript to the story is, which I'll make you listen to. So it's a few days later. I got a big head. This is nothing.
Yeah,
I'm going to do this for the rest of my life or whatever. We had a couple of days off. These were all these big athletic places, but they usually were all at a campus, University of Michigan, Texas. So I get a call. Guy calls me up. So now there's like 3 days. We're now all the way at we're in Atlanta. And they call me up, and it's somebody from William Morris, who was the agency, who was the Carpenters agent. They said, Brandy, you got a few days off. You don't have to be in Miami for like 4 days. I said, yeah, I'm sitting at this great hotel in Atlanta, figure I'm just going to do nothing. This is a great thing. And he says, we have something for you. When? Tomorrow night. Oh, okay. You're going to do another opening. I said, well, what? Just do what you do. Okay. Well, I can't do anything else because I don't know anything else. I can only do, at the piano, those 10 songs.
Right.
I can't vary it or try to do something else. So they said, fine, it's fine. Where is it? It's at the Phoenix Celebrity Theater. It's a very famous place. I said, yeah, but I'm in Atlanta. Yeah, but tomorrow morning you're taking a plane at 6 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Who's the act? Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention.
Wow.
Okay. Now, you can't get a more different situation or audience than the Carpenters, the whitest of white. And Frank Zappa? I said, but. He said, I was easy. No one has to do anything. Guy's going to get up. I don't know. It was the right time. So I made all the excuses, but they didn't want to hear it. So I went, and of course it was crazy. People throwing things at me.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but it was, you talk about, it's the minute I walked out, they hated me, and I'm doing the songs, and I can't see anything because he has speakers. And the other thing was, the reason the Phoenix Celebrity Theater is so famous is there's a revolving stage that I didn't know was revolving.
Oh.
It goes like, so that when I got done, if I walked out from the quote backstage this way and sat at the piano, you get done, what do? Turn around, you walk out. Except I wasn't there anymore. I was over there. Therefore, when I was looking to get out, the audience had a fucking field day. They were laughing because they realized I didn't know where
you were lost.
I jumped down, maybe the stage was this high, walked up the aisle, got a hot dog, went back, and left the town.
That's amazing.
And
that's a legendary
the latest
exit.
flight that was out of that airport to anywhere. And then made my way back the next day to Atlanta to continue on with them. When a day or two later, and figure it, I didn't meet anybody. I didn't meet Zappa. Yeah. I didn't want to meet Zappa. I mean, I just got out of town.
Right.
My thing so I was shocked when a couple of days later they called me and said, "Okay, your next date." I said, "What are you talking about?" They thought you were great. They didn't think I was great at all. I was easy. They didn't have to do anything. Who cares who opens for Frank Zappa? Anyway, okay.
Well, question for you, because from my limited understanding, and obviously I'm not a musician, so this is really just bird's eye view. And actually, if we could pull this a little closer to you as well, just because
that?
Yeah, you can pull the whole stand, the vertical part. I can pull that toward you. Yeah. It seems like a major shift in the way the business operates for you starting out. Let's say, your first few albums, instead of being signed onto one major deal, now the business seems more single-oriented, or even having so much accessibility to internet money or putting your things up online. I'm curious in terms of, from your experience, how you view the business now and how artists such as yourself may take stock in what you've done in your career. Or do you think that there's such a new direction for artists to follow that there's almost like a departure from the way musicians were able to scale themselves from the past? Do you have those thoughts where you look at emerging artists that just come in from such an indirect angle?
You know what? I don't. Some people may, but I never approach anything like that. It's all it's music. I'm a musician. I don't care if I'm composing a theme for television or a film score or a song. I don't really, the business has totally changed. Mm-hmm. And because I left it, right. I really left it, and I couldn't do anything else and didn't want to. When you're scoring films the way I was, you don't have time for anything. Right. As a musician, musically, if you can deal with the pressure, and if you can't, you're gone.
Right.
In 3 seconds, you can't do that. So I didn't deal with it. Now I'm kind of back into it because I was screwing around with something about the COVID situation 9 months ago or something, and I wrote this coming out the other side and didn't even know if I would play it for anybody. Right. But then I did, and it prompted this interest. And now, I mean, it's not just that. I had thought about it, but anytime anybody, when I was doing a film, asked me to write a song, no one would ever ask a composer to write a song for film, and there are no more songs in films. Songs in films are records that they've put in for a montage or an end credit that are pre-done. There's no more writing Moon River for breakfast at Tiffany's.
What do you mean by that? They don't like watch and play live towards it? What do you mean by there are no more?
No, film, no, songs, no. You may give me an in. They don't do that anymore. And the film score, that's a whole other thing, and that's what I do. Right. And I have no interest. Songs are not any part of any film, a story. There may be a scene, but most of the time, musicals are different, granted.
Right.
Somebody does a Disney musical, you got to write songs for the animation. That's different, but I'm talking about dramatic films, be it comedy or action. No, and my job is, the director would laugh at me. No one's interested in me. I've got a real situation making each scene that needs musical enhancement and further a director's vision for each scene. That's my job, not writing a song.
Right.
That's a joke. Songs have nothing to do with the film. They come later on. Somebody released a record, and where do they play it? They play it in the end credit.
Right.
Once in a while. Now, you will hear source music. There'll be a scene in a car, and depending on what the scene is, maybe the song has more importance, but it wasn't written for that.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. You know, I'm quite familiar with your work even before we met. I was actually recently rewatching The Mask, one of my all-time favorite movies. And, you know, I was listening to your composition of that movie and kind of comparing it to the other ones I'm a little more familiar with. For example, Dragonheart, which is probably, I think, your number one most listened to composition on Spotify, if I'm not incorrect. The main theme for Dragonheart. It's just interesting to see them compared side by side. And I really wonder how your process of approaching your music is. I mean, I know a lot of artists have a sense of ritual, which helps drive the ingenuity in it. Because on one hand, you have The Mask, which is this intriguing, kind of mysterious, almost celestial tone you have in the song. And where Dragonheart is really this like 3-act story within the music itself. And they're so drastically different. I'm curious how you approach.
The approach as a film composer is always the same. It's the exact same. It doesn't matter what the picture is. It doesn't matter if it's good, bad, comedy, serious drama. It's the same approach. You got to look at what someone has done, and as far as how much time you have, it's how much time are they going to give you. If it's a week, it's a week. If it's a year, I could spend a year on every one of these things, but you don't have that. Maybe you have a month. I mean, once you get an edited. Oh, yeah.
30
and
days
every
is
one
normal.
of them. I did Last of the Mohicans in 2 weeks.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's the most successful as far as it's the biggest selling film soundtrack, not with songs, just score. The last I don't know what, and I put that together in an afternoon because nobody was interested in releasing it, and I had to not only put it together with a few other disparate musical things, but I had to get somebody to do it because no one wanted to do it.
Right.
You know. Wow. And I was lucky to find somebody to do it. And
Trevor Jones, right?
No.
That's who did it with you?
No, I did. No, well, yes, I wrote half the score, but I did the album. Trevor Jones was mad at me, hating my guts. I had nothing to do with that. See, I was, for a time, there were 2 movies. Mm-hmm. There's never 2 composers on a film.
Oh.
Ever. But I did 2 huge ones. Twins, we talk about different things, and Last of the Mohicans. Now, people think it says music by Randy Edelman and George Delarue. George Delarue, the best. Or music by Randy Edelman and Trevor Jones. I never met those people. I don't even know them.
Wow.
So how did you do those scores? I looked at the picture and I wrote the music. Unless you're an idiot, if you're talented, if you're a good composer, you're not going to be too off the track. Twins was a different situation. Mohicans was a Michael Mann picture, and it's a drama, so it kind of dictates each scene what you can do. Comedies are much more difficult, and I was the king of comedy for many years. But to your question, and in that case, which is a whole story filled with lies, and when you have that kind of success with something, I mean lies, on the album, not this album,
right.
The remake, that's how successful it was, when the Scottish Symphony Orchestra does a remake. Who's in attendance at the remake? Trevor Jones.
Oh, I see. Because Promontory is one of the greatest and most emotional songs I've ever heard.
Well, but you have to understand, there's a lot of stuff going on in that picture. It's all based on something called The Gale, which I didn't write and he didn't write. Doogie McClanahan. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All that's something else. So if you look at anyway, so I don't want to dispute anything, because this is still going on now, 1 billion years later. So I was brought into the project because there was a problem. What the problem is, I'm not sure, but obviously there was a problem. So Trevor left, went back to England or Scotland, and I was brought in a really bizarre situation, which I did because at the time I had done all these comedies, and I was looking to do anything dramatic. So I did Gettysburg, and I did Mohicans, and I did the remake of Diabolique, and I did Dragonheart, and blah, blah, blah. So when I put that album together, I was the only one left with all this stuff, and I did something and then finally found somebody to put it out, and they said, oh, you got to do the order of the film. I said, no. Not even knowing anything would happen, because that's the way you have to listen. No, that's not the way you listen to a film score. You better, or you'll fall asleep. You may have an opening of the film score, and there may be 3 or 4 cues at the beginning that are the same mood, which is fine for the film. But a listener's going to be snoozing. So you put it together using the music from the film in a listenable way. So when they asked me to do that in the film order, I said, no, there could be a question about who did what. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put Trevor stuff like that, produced in Merma, and I put Randy stuff like that. And that's what I did. So there's no question about it. You listen to a piece, who wrote it? Not Trevor, Randy. Randy or Trevor. So that became a crazy thing. You know, I fought. And so we were disqualified from the Oscars because there were 2 composers. I changed all that now. It's changed now.
Right.
However, we got nominated for the Golden Globe. We got nominated for the British Academy Award. So I went to the Golden Globes, and he went to the British Globes because we weren't speaking. And we never did speak. And we never had spoken. There was never a problem. I just came into a situation. That's what happened with Twins. That was different, though. They wanted music for Danny DeVito to be different than Arnold's music.
Right.
It didn't turn out like that, but that was my thing. So those were odd occurrences. And what happened is I got known as like this guy can come in a second and do anything. He'll fix any problem. But that wasn't really the case. Right. It just was 2 very different films that no one would have known about if they weren't such huge successes in those 2 genres. But your question, the approach to anything is the same. You look at what it is they've done, and you decide quickly what's appropriate. And with film composing, there's 2 things. You have to be fast and right.
What do you mean by right?
Right in your musical concept. If you're fast and you come up with the wrong thing, forget it. If you're slow and you come up with the right thing, that won't work either, because it ain't going to be done in time. So you have to be fast and right. And if you're not, you can't do that work. You can do it, but you're going to be gone. Right. Because it's too political, and there's 100 great people standing in line at the door to do any film. And I mean any film, not just the great ones. Right. So it's
thing that always baffled me was how important the composition is to the comedy, because it's almost like a symbiotic relationship where on screen, if there wasn't the composition landing a lot of the empty pauses and the beats and the rhythm of the comedy, it feels a little almost mockumentary, right?
Right.
So when you're approaching a comedy, how much emphasis are you putting on the timing? And more importantly, from a compositional standpoint, how do you work around the timing of actors to get your music?
Okay, well, in my case, and I always say this, if you're working with a really talented actor / comic person, I don't care if it's Adam Sandler or Jim Carrey or whoever it is, the most successful comedies, and a lot of the ones that I did, if I put music on, you'd never know it's a comedy in the first place. I don't write comedy music.
Right.
So you got to decide. So the successful comedies are where the leading guy, his character, is good, and it shouldn't need music. Certain scenes, of course, because of what they are, the background, may need music. But in most cases, these guys don't need music accenting the comic nature of their movie, the romance, the action, the darkness, the tension, something else may need music. But I said this again in some concept last night because Ivan Reitman, who I did 6 or 7 huge pictures, very tough guy, not a funny guy, made funny, who died last week.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. We never, in Ghostbusters 2, in Kindergarten Cop, and Twins, Beethoven about the dog, 6 Days and 7 Nights, a really underrated funny picture with Harrison Ford.
Oh, one of my favorite movies.
I wasn't playing comedy at all. And those movies with him were like dead serious work. I mean, that was hard work, really hard work. And you'd think some of these other guys like the great Alan Parker or Michael Mann or Ron Howard, when I work with them, you think, oh, these guys really know what they're doing. They're great because they hire you, and you know what? Don't hire this guy if you don't trust him.
Right.
They hire you, and they know what they want or what it should be. They're not scared. A lot of these directors, you'd be shocked, are like scared. They don't know what they want, or they have something preconceived. And if you don't play them, their temp score, which is what every movie has a temp score, that's their music. That's what the time is spent on, not the real score. That comes in at the end. When they preview, when they make their trailers, they don't have that. So these guys are, it depends what the situation is. But I have found, at least with most of those comedies, there are certain ones with like a guy like an English director, Jonathan Lynn, who I did My Cousin Vinny with, for instance.
Yes.
Which is basically, I'd say it's a Southern rock and roll score, but I didn't want it to sound like a score at all. So I had to decide where to play the music, where to play the music when they're in court, where to play the music when they keep throwing them in jail, how to play the little scene at the beginning that the movie is based on, where these kids steal or don't steal a Campbell's soup, tomato soup.
Right.
But all that stuff, it takes a while those are harder because they don't dictate what to play. And if you are playing some of those funny scenes, how to play it, and as you say, the timing of it. But as far as like where to hit beats for the comedy, that's something I didn't spend a lot of time on. And in most cases where you have an Eddie Murphy or they're wonderful, talented guys, they carry it. The Mask was a different situation. And interestingly enough, in The Mask, if you listen to my soundtrack, and I went to Ireland to do The Mask. You ask why. I won't tell you too long story. Why would you go to Ireland? They had no money. It was nothing when I started it. Wow. It was close to the release of that Pet Detective picture of his.
Yeah.
And then he became a big thing. And 4 months later, The Mask came out. But at the beginning, that picture hadn't come out. Wow. So my kid was the one, I didn't want to do it. And they had no money. It wasn't that. It was just that he was doing a lot of pre-recorded songs, which I didn't want to have anything to do with. And so Noah said, he made me go down. We went down to Grauman's Chinese to see the Pet Detective. And I looked at this guy and I said, wow, this is somebody new. This is a gifted person. And so I did it, thank God. But at the beginning, The Mask started. This is so crazy. These people, it's like they're nuts. So they have a screening of The Mask while I was running it. What do they have a screening for? They, have a recruited audience. Who's the audience for The Mask? Little kids, I guess. No. So they have a screening. The picture opens. It's these Nordic, seamen, pirates, years 1750. And they're on this thing, and it's really authentic. They spent that's where they spent all their money on that picture, on the opening. And what are they doing? They're burying something. They're burying some sacred mask. That's the beginning of the picture. And it's very serious, and so I wrote an opera for that opening. Really was excited about it. Because you don't get it, and you don't get the opportunity to do really interesting things, especially in these mainline movies, because they're not taking any chances. Yeah. Everything is a rehash of something. I don't care how beautiful it is. Okay, so sorry, I had recorded the score. So they had a screening, and the picture starts. Now this big thing comes on. It's 1750, and these whatever they're called, these, and it's like the kids are sitting there. What the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Okay, then that ends. They bury some, very mysterious thing. Mm-hmm. Then the picture starts, and we go and we see this schmuck working in the bank. And then something happens, and he sees the girl, and he's driving home, and something happens, and he falls over the bridge, and he goes into the water, and then suddenly discovers this thing. What's the thing? Somehow, in Edge City, like a Batman kind of place, right? And whatever year it is, you don't know. Somehow that thing they buried in 1750, they must have made some kind of, that's what he found.
Right.
So now they have the screening, and after the screenings, it didn't really go very well. And they're sitting in the thing, and they say, forget it. We got to eliminate the opening. We'll start the picture in the bank. And I said to myself, that was my best, not my best. It was a really big thing for me. I said, they can't do that. It doesn't make any sense without that. Plus my theme, which is based on that music, which is I had lots of different kinds of things, but the darkness of it
and the climb
is
right?
based. Yeah, the whole is based on that. So they can't do that. Done.
Oh, man.
Picture opens in the back with a guy. Picture is a monster. He had all over the world, and but it just shows you, on my thing, I made sure it opens my soundtrack thing. Because I'm not. But it's just stuff happens. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to basically walk away from it after you kill yourself on it. But it just shows, I said, they can't do that. It makes no sense. Well, it obviously did.
So it makes me wonder, and we're good, right? No, I mean, we're recording everything.
Oh, you got a time thing?
No. I just want to make sure.
You can't have time on this.
So when you compose, what percentage of what you make actually sees the screen?
That depends on how the director reacts to what I play him. If he walks in the door and I play him and he likes everything, it all's there. It's not there maybe in the form that I did my kind of synth mock-up or anything,
right?
Which is a whole other thing. But they decide, and in film, television is networks and producers. On a film, composer works really, it's 99% your director relationship.
Right.
Unless it's someone they toss out or don't trust. Then they'll bring somebody else in. They'll call you and say, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. Like that thing we were talking about. So, yeah. Now, it depends the timing, what kind of thing it is. I do write many times several different ideas for each scene. I can write 50 ideas. Even though you say, how could it goes from here to here? It's a guy running down the street. Where you write 50 things? That's simplifying it. But there's different ways to do it. It may be a long tone with no rhythm. It may be only rhythm.
Right.
It may be some theme that you've already introduced, played on something. So there's different ways of doing it. And normally and that's why I say in a drama or an action thing, it pretty dictates. It's much easier. But comedy, that's, or sometimes they want music, and I look at it and say, this doesn't need any music. But you know what? You can never do that, because if they want music and used it in their temp and previewed it, and they got like an 82, that's a good number. I like pictures to get like a 34, and they think it's a disaster, and they don't fuck with me. You know what I mean? But if they get an 82 and you add music, maybe the audience won't like it, and they'll get a 78. So it's picking where it goes. And then once a composer is done with the score, you're gone. Yeah. The picture could change. Your music changes drastically. They do their mix, and they can do anything they want. Wow. They can use a cue, not use a cue, do a separation thing, recognize a cue, or change the cues around. Famous story about Leonard Bernstein is his friend Aaron Copland said, hey, who did several great scores, hey, this is the thing you should be doing, writing film scores, in between your musicals and conducting the New York Philharmonic. So he did a great film called On the Waterfront. Okay? Classic. That's the only film he ever wrote, score. Forget about West Side Story, musical, or the Candide. Those were movies made of his musicals, but he never had anything to do with them. And he never would, because they took his music and they
recycled it.
They moved it around.
Yeah.
The opening wasn't the opening. And I've had that happen many times. So you have to kind of leave it. Right. And I try to do, on the soundtrack, I put most of, what I like, or all of what I like, on the soundtrack. And if you ever write a cue to a film, and like I said, they don't have a scene in their preconceived model or notion, which is their temp score, and you write a cue for some place that they didn't have music, and the director's been living with this for a year or 6 months, and you go and you do the session, and it turns out that cue you did is the best thing in the picture. It's never in the picture. They never use it. And I've had a lot of things happen with stuff from my soundtrack used for opening the Super Bowl, or Pacific Life, whale coming out of the water commercials, or different uses, using those cues. Wow. Thank God for my soundtrack, because they weren't in the film, except for Michael Mann in Last of the Mohicans. And he did something that was unreal. There's a scene, if you know that movie, most people know, ever seen that movie, there's a scene before a lot of the stuff takes place, sort of in the beginning of the film, where the two daughters of the army, the head guy, they're trapped in this, in
the valley.
Yeah, this is before all the stuff happens with the tribe, and Magua, that frightening guy.
God, so good.
He was so great. It scared me every time I saw it. And so the girls somehow make their way to the father, who can't believe his girls from London are there some way, and they shouldn't be there.
Right.
They're there, and they're pretty out. You're in the, we're going to, because he realizes the desperate situation that they're in. And there is a young officer who obviously works for the
British
major,
Empire,
whatever, yeah. And he is in love with the daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And so before everything happens, they're having this garden party, whatever you want to call it. And they're out in this garden now, and it's a brilliant scene. While they are out in this garden, in the forest, you see Magua, you see this guy, and gradually these tribes are getting together because in about 5 minutes, they're going to unleash the bloodiest thing you've ever seen. So they're back there. But in front of that is this poor schmuck telling Cora, is her name, how much he loves her and how when this is all over, they're going to go back to England and have this big, beautiful wedding. And you can tell, even before stuff happened with Daniel Day-Lewis and her, she's just not really into it in any way. She's concerned about her father, the situation, but she's not. But anyway, she's okay. So in most cases, I would have said, you know what? It's so frightening. You don't need any. The scene is Magua.
Right.
Not this little thing happening in front of it.
Right. It's the lurking monster.
So don't, and it's shot brilliantly. It's just very cool. Don't touch it. Don't fuck with it. Don't make it. It doesn't need an added layer.
Right.
However, wouldn't it be interesting in like 2 weeks or something? It wasn't 2 weeks, maybe it was 4 weeks, what it was. If you, since it's so good, what you think, okay, we'll play the danger lurking. You don't need to play that. It's already scary. Why don't you play this poor schmuck proposing to this woman? And then, this is like 1,000,000 to 1 shot. If it works, it's really bizarre. Because you already have the danger working. But it'll make it more kind of emotional, especially later on what happens with that guy.
Yeah. Oof.
And when Daniel Day-Lewis shoots him when he's burning up, just as a
brutal
human. Yeah. So I decide I'm going to do it, I'm going to play this dialogue of this guy proposing to, and I call it Cora. And like I said, it's a scene that never was conceived with music. It wasn't in their temp score. It didn't need music. But, so you say you took a chance. What kind of chance? You do it, they don't use it. But it's not as easy as that. It's kind of like, if you're going to do it, you got to do it correctly. You got to write it. You got to time it. You have to record it with the orchestra. You got to do a lot of stuff. It's not just an easy decision, especially when you don't have a lot of time. So I did it. And thank God I did it. It's just,
wow,
the best. Just, and right on that album. And I've been places where people always ask me about that. And I'll just, maybe about 1.5 years ago, I went to do a festival in, the across from Casablanca. What's that? That's just like an amazing place. I'll think of it. And it was a film music festival that they have in Europe, but this one is unbelievable. And I also did like what I did last night. I conducted the orchestra, and then I did my own night in a little opera house, similar to what I did last night, but only like 45 minutes. And the concert is over. There's a bunch of people, and people come from all over to these concerts. You say, well, because film music is different. Used to be had to go to a store and find what film. They don't have now. Boom, you press your thing. The next day, it's at your door. So that whole market, people like a film score when you see the movie. You can have it tomorrow. First of all, it's done, and you can get it fast. So I get done with the thing, and there's a bunch of people lined up, and they're all very nice, and blah, blah, blah. And then I look, and blah, 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 and then all of a sudden, there's a girl. She's this high. Maybe she's 6, 7. And it's like you're looking, shaking hands, and thank you very much for signing the soundtrack. And I look down, I close this, and she goes, "My name is Cora."
Oh, wow.
Makes me, and standing beside her, these young kids, her mother and father, and when they met, their favorite thing was to listen to this album, and they listened to this thing and decided if they had a child, it was Cora.
Wow. That's beautiful.
Could you imagine? It's like you go, what? Wow. And, it's just like unbelievable. And what that does is just like, you can't even, the fact that stuff like that can happen based on something that you wrote quickly under pressure, and all of a sudden it's 15 years later, and a little girl is saying, "My parents named me after this music that they love."
So in that moment, did you suddenly become aware of how much effect you've had on the world with your music?
Well, when things happen like that, yes, but you don't really think of it like that. You really think about that piece, that thing, and like I said, if they hadn't used it, or I hadn't decided, you know what, I'm going to go for this, I could have easily made my life easier. Why write music for a brilliant scene anyway?
Right.
Does this story need music? It worked without it, but I did it, and it touched an emotion. And then, of course, you have a soundtrack that sells like 5 million copies.
Right.
No soundtrack of just music. There's no records, over a period of years. So that's great. Yeah. I mean, it's just like,
When you're in that crossroads between deciding to take a creative risk, how do you judge your intuition's response to the moment? Is there a particular thought pattern you go through? Is it a sensation that you've become more familiar with as you were extending your artistry to more and more different types of songs and types of composition? Is there some sort of lesson in between knowing in that moment when you should do something, or was it just amazing, beautiful coincidence?
You just have to really use your instinct. There's not, plus, when we're talking about film scoring now, songs are a totally different thing. You do that. It's not a discipline, really. You can do it, write a great song in 5 minutes if you have a good idea and a musical concept. But with film scoring, a lot of it is trial and error, but you have to do it quickly. And who's trial and error? It's not me and the director. It's me, because I'm the one there doing it. Right. Hopefully, if they give me a little time by myself, and they don't, at 3 a.m, and you make a decision. And when the guy comes through the door, am I going to play him 3 ideas for this scene or 1? Because if I don't play him the idea, and my second idea was great, he's never going to hear it. And you're going to be happy when he leaves, and you have to move on to the next section tomorrow, and it won't be there. Just like the thing I told you about. I mean, I could have easily left it alone and made my life, especially not having a lot of time, in a picture that was considered a disaster, a problem. I mean, they ran out of money with Last of the Mohicans. They had to get that, it's a completion bond thing. They had to go out and get another company to come in. And that's how I got the album out, because Morgan Creek, another company, bought certain rights to it and got the music rights, because they were in trouble. They thought it was a long historical thing. And even though there was nobody in it, and you say, well, hold on. Daniel Day-Lewis had won an Oscar for My Left Foot. Well, that's all fine, but he'd never been in any picture that did any kind of business. So they didn't consider him a star, really.
Right. He wasn't
and meanwhile, he was so great in it, he never got credit. Because if you had ever met him, which I eventually did, he's like this little meek guy.
Yeah.
He's not Hawkeye. How he looked like that and moved like that, I don't know. Yeah. But no one ever really, they believed him in the movie, but he just never got, you talk about an Oscar for Best Actor or being nominated, holy shit. The guy, that's not who he is. He's this guy. He didn't say 2 words when we were together. I mean, he did, but it's just like, hey, Rand, what a great pleasure to meet you. No. what a great pleasure it is to meet you. Just a polite guy.
When you look back on your work, are there any particular moments that you wish you could redo, or any particular songs that you just are so deeply connected to? And I know we brought up Cora, but to me, in any artistic project that I do, it's almost like a little chapter of my life in the moment. And going back to those particular projects reinvigorates the feelings that I had in that period of time of my life. So I'm curious, looking back at your discography, what moments really would you put on your historical timeline as a highlight?
Well, okay, go back to what you said as far as redoing anything.
Is there anything unfinished that you wish?
Oh, there's a lot unfinished, but I don't. Yeah. Luckily, I've done enough stuff that I don't really. I mean, there's stuff, but not anything really that's on the front of my. That I say, you know what, I need to get back in. There is one thing. That's ongoing that I want to do. Okay, but that's the only thing that's a musical project. A big one that's would be very difficult, and we just haven't had time to devote to what has to go into something like that. And it's not like it's my life's work, but it's something that I'd like to see come to fruition in some state. But it takes a lot of doing. But other than that, I don't. And normally I don't listen to stuff. Now it's so funny. It astounds me. It's so easy to go on your phone and
yes.
Like I wanted to do a song last night that I haven't done called "Sentimental Fools," and there's no. Press it up on your phone, jot down the words and the chords. It'll take you about 3 seconds. But the fact that I can just go and get it,
it's amazing.
And then it's sort of like, well, maybe they don't have it. Well, it doesn't matter. The technology amazes me. Yeah. And to think that kids growing up now, that's taken for granted. That's the way they're going to grow up.
Right.
They're never going to go to a record store. They're never even going to make a phone call.
Do you think that there's some sort of like fetish missing with the playing of music that you miss? The pulling the album out of the sleeve, choosing it, browsing through your whole rank and file of albums, pulling the one out, flipping it over to the A or B side, lightly placing it on the on the spinning table.
Yeah, no, I used to love, especially in this period where I was talking about when I got out of school and I got into these albums. Well, I would pull out the album, but I wanted to see who was on it, who was playing, who did this, who did that. Yeah. But obviously you could have done that with CDs. So you get to do that. But no, I don't know what a kid now who just doesn't even know any concept of even purchasing it. Maybe, purchase it, pay a bunch of money, and you got 8 billion albums at your disposal because that's with the streaming.
I had the opposite experience. CDs were really where it started to become a little bit more marketable. The covers of the CDs, the artist on the cover. But I actually started with cassettes. And so we would play cassettes of like Queen, for example. And you wouldn't have any idea of what they look like. You would have no idea how they dress, no idea how they're marketed, nothing. It's just purely music. And so I'm curious from your perspective, how much do you think one aspect of an artist, whether they're highly marketable or, visually stunning, can do these amazing, like taking Lady Gaga's music aside, her stage performance is pretty amazing, right? It's huge. It's spectacular. How much do you think the visual aids of music informs the career of the artist these days? And you think it's a little less dependent on the visual or more dependent on the visual in order to break through?
I don't know if when I say I'm qualified to say that. It depends what it is. Sometimes it's very important in terms of someone like Lady Gaga, who's brilliantly talented.
She's so good.
Well, if no one ever saw her, well, that does have to do with her success because So in that case, it doesn't mean she's just a spectacle. No, she's a brilliant talent, and she's used the spectacle almost like Madonna. She had a spectacle. It didn't mean that she wasn't talented. She's obviously not as talented as Lady Gaga, but she had a certain thing that she did. So I don't know. The answer is it depends what it is. Although it's always, I guess, effective to have someone who can present something really interesting visual for a listener. But if it's how much it adds to their success would depend on what it is that they do. Obviously, the most effective thing is that the performance and whatever musically they do connects with this other thing. And when that connects, then it's important. Yeah. Was Elton John's crazy outfits, did that make him a better songwriter? No, but maybe when he started out and he went out and he was doing this crazy stuff.
Yeah, more impressionable.
Maybe, but does it affect the artist's creativity? No, I don't think so. But it may affect the people who are going to see him. So,
if you were to share what kind of music you have on your own Spotify, what do you think would be the most surprising artist or music that you listen to today?
Well, that is I don't listen to music.
What?
No. No. You know what? There's several people you ask the same question.
Wow.
People like John Williams tell me the same thing. When I'm not composing, I don't listen to music. It's the least thing I want to do. If I go away, I never listen to music.
Wow.
Now, I've written a lot of music, so it's not like I need something for inspiration. Now, what do I listen to? Like I just went to a concert last week down at the Music Center. It's always going to be classical music, and both romantic and very, Paul Hindemith or Igor Stravinsky. I'm interested in that. Now, that's old hat, what I just said.
Yeah.
That's old music. There's newer things, and I'm interested, but I don't constantly listen to it. And as far as listening to, I just don't. I maybe should, but I just don't. I don't play it around my house.
That's interesting.
Because I think I've heard of, and it's not people just saying that. It's just you're not listening to it for inspiration, though maybe you should, and maybe it would expand your creativity and your horizons. But I just never. I have always been. I'm a solo entity.
Right.
I've never worked with anybody. I work with people when I work with musicians and do scores. But as far as what I do, I'm just like a guy behind a piano.
Yeah.
Same thing as I was when I was 6 years old. Baby Randy.
And you think if you were to start listening to music now, do you think it would dilute your product?
No. And it's not that I don't want to lead you astray. It's not that I don't listen. I listen to everything. I listen to the serious, pop stuff and serious, hip hop stuff. I hear all the stuff, but I don't analyze it. And very rarely, if I hear something I think is interesting, look how simple it is to just get it. You can hear it in a second. But does it influence me? Very, very rarely, unless basically, do I steal stuff?
Well, I mean, as an artist myself, yes. I feel like it's, in order to excel, there is this little bit of this homogenization of other people's ideas into your views of something similar, and then whatever's in the middle.
But normally, in the stuff of mine, all the different things that are now available, whether they're scores or songs, somebody may say, "Oh, that's not a ripoff," but that sounds like it's not the newest stuff. As far as film, there's nothing being done original because there's nothing being original done in film. There's a few things, but you'll probably not see them because there's too many political, financial things involved. Mm-hmm. So everybody making a film wants it to be like, they'll think this is good because that thing sold. Or
it's very formulaic. You're right.
Yeah,
it has
because everybody doing it wants to get to the next level and the next. So, but
would you say there are some exceptions? Right, like we're in the golden era of some historical dramas, which are bringing in all these amazing world music influences. Like case in point, Marco Polo bringing in Tuvan throat chanting, or Vikings bringing in like Ivar, who's, or Wardruna, or all these different musicians that add different percussive elements. Yeah.
I don't know.
They're like a pagan folk Norse.
No. It's all good.
Yeah.
All good.
So
I'm not saying. What I'm saying is that if you're asking me, there may be times, but most of the time, I get involved with whatever it is, and I just go, and it doesn't involve me listening to something. I'm thinking of something that I did that's not innovative at all, where I listened to something and then I used it for something that's very unimportant. But yeah, this is how few times I'm actually thinking of something in a movie that I did when I went to a concert. It was an inconsequential scene. It was almost like background noise, but it was influenced by something that I saw the night before. But that doesn't, and the fact that I'm even remembering it is it's insane. But not too often. I mean, it's just, and by the way, that may not be. I'm not recommending that to anybody else.
Right.
In my case, or the first time when I started, when I was the comedy king, but I was also this Asian. Once I did Alan Parker's film about the internment camps, Come See the Paradise, which is like a brilliant film that nobody saw, but he was my favorite director for years. And that's the only film I did with him. But when you think of Bugsy Malone and Mississippi Burning and Fame and Shoot the Mood and Birdie and Mississippi Burning, Sky, every film we did, we would run down to the theater to see, So when I worked with him, it was great. But when I started with that, and then that led to the Dragon, the Bruce Lee story. And then it led to the Jackie Chan films, Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights, which were blasts because the canvases were so great. One took place in the Old West, and the other was in England. But I'm not sure how I got there. But I was, it's not like I immersed and of course, everybody involved in those films, they wanted the authentic thing. I mean, It sounds funny because some of them were they're comedies, but that doesn't matter. Everybody is serious, and when they want the score, so I always used. I bought real, Asian groups in London. I bought a group from Paris, but it's what I'm getting to is I didn't go and study up on and listen to Asian music. I did my thing. And, but I would hope that the inception's not like, this is the same thing you would have written if it took place in New York. No, it was, and then I just did it and used the appropriate instrumentation. But it's not like I went and immersed myself listening to Asian music. And that may not be good.
Right.
But that's my same thing with whether I do Gettysburg, about the Civil War. Did I go back and no, of course not.
So your approach is always to the piano and connecting with the idea.
But although it took a long time for me, I try to get away from the piano.
Really?
Because, best composers don't. Because if you, at the beginning, I fall back on everything it doesn't mean that everything is played on the piano, but it's a certain formula. Some of the great composers are like horn players, because they're thinking they have a different palette.
Right.
Whereas I would immediately, everything is very notey. And so I had to get away from that. Right. And electronics and technology helped me with that because I could just do other things.
So seeing that element now in composition, right? I think of Hans Zimmer, who brought in more of this synth into, cinematic music. Do you see a departure from the classic piano as being really the backbone to the composition itself, and leaning more towards like ambient music for movies?
Well, there's obviously a lean towards it. There's been for years this whole ambiance, and sound design.
Right.
But people are still, whether it's Hans or anybody else, they're not playing the piano. They're playing their thing, and they're using the sound. of the piano where it's appropriate. But the whole sound design thing and ambience is, that is great when when it enhances the approach to whatever the visual is.
Right.
But some people go overboard,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't hear anything. You just hear like
Drone. Yeah.
the old drone. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people like to do, especially on all these some of them are really good, interesting, Netflix thing or, streaming things. And especially with so much suspense stuff on, the drone is taking over. Doesn't mean there's never a melody, but it's obviously, and those kinds of things, incidentally, when you put them behind a scene, are very, it's easy to get sucked into thinking, oh, that's really good there.
Right.
Yeah, it's good. Why? It's good because it was shot pretty quickly and you didn't really cover all the bases. It doesn't look that great, but when you put that sound in, if the character who's acting is on the money and it's kind of suspenseful, you put that sound design in and it's like, oh, yeah, that works. But you haven't really, that may work a couple of times, but as far as the narrative of the music, thematically, it probably won't enhance it. So you've got to put that with the other thing.
Right.
But, there's a lot of that.
As we are getting further and further into the digital information age, slowly getting into more of like the transhumanism age with the emergence of companies like Meta and, technologies like VR and the typical consumer's relationship with video games especially. I wonder, from your perspective, how that might open up some interesting doors, because a lot of people's favorite compositions these days are either movies or games. And the amount of hours spent in a game leaves a lot more room for creative risks, such as adding in a Cora, maybe with 4 or 5 different occasions, depending on what happens. So do you look at that that excitement of new video games coming out as the real like narrative storytelling avenue as a means of maybe something you can work on?
Well, I don't know if it's something I can work on. I mean, I haven't done a game, but obviously that's a huge area. And it may present musical opportunities depending, but now I would have said a while ago, but what does it sound like? But now things sound pretty good.
Pretty amazing.
I've been watching all the Academy films. It's terrible. But late at night, I'm in bed, and you'd think, oh, put it here, or put it on at least your pad. I sit there, the sound coming out of my phone.
Right.
I'm talking about the music from the movie. It's just, I'm sitting there watching the film. And it's not like, are you holding the phone? Well, I have the phone. It's fine. Yeah. It's good. I get it. So as those things get better, then it's going to allow a really fine composer to do something in that area and create and have the outcome of his product be first class. And if that's the case, then there's really no difference. Mm-hmm. It's always nice to go to a huge theater, but who's going there? Nobody. Yeah.
Now, we've had some interesting news in the past few days, right? We've had some historical moments happen, especially in the past 4 days. And these types of conversations that Americans are having now, of course, are going to inform the way art is developed from this point forward. Do you feel that, given the recent events, that there's some sort of shift in terms of where you feel the emotional pools of your creation kind of lean you towards? Like, is there some sort of draw towards a particular exploration of a particular type? Are you nudged in that way by current events? Like when you see something maybe inspiring or terrible?
Yeah, no, but I've always been, and I've written songs about it. Many songs about things that most people don't know. But you looked at the albums, and you would see going from way back. I'm commenting on everything. I'm not known for that, but they're right there for everybody to see and hear. So, yeah, I think the things that really get me lately in all kinds of areas, especially after this whole COVID thing, and the horror of what's going on, you know, in the Ukraine. I mean, that effect, I mean, it's just like, God, you know, you hear stories about people, and it's just, people are remarkable, you know, and you just say, wow, that's what it's all about. I mean, you just hear these stories, and so it definitely affects me.
Yeah.
Now, if I happen to be working on something and that kind of is siphoned into my brain and my heart, I may be using it. But as far as, or writing a song about something,
right.
I could write 1 billion songs about what I've seen in the last couple of days in that area. Then there's other things that are going on. But I'm just not right there, not spending my time on that right now. But and once in a while I'll jot something down, say this is a good, something to explore, you know. And yeah, most of those things go by the wayside. But it's not like they go in a drawer and then, as you said, things are unfinished. But there's a few things. But God, there's a lot of things going on in the world now that are frightening and scary, and things are moving fast.
Yeah.
So it does, I think it affects you, and it also, certain things that may have seemed important to you, it's everybody, you realize they don't mean anything, you know, and there are other things that really do mean something. So hopefully you channel what each of us have. In my case, it's my writing and my music into, you know, maybe trying to do a little better.
Yeah.
For myself, and that in turn will maybe help somebody else. So I'm kind of enjoying doing these like little things that I'm doing now. I don't know, I'm not sure why, because there are other times that I say, and it is, I think, the association with people and their reaction to things that maybe I did a while ago that I didn't realize had the value that they do have. And you should kind of, when I say milk that, not milk it in a selfish way, but explore that. And that could go in unexpected directions, which is why I'm so kind of enthusiastic about right now where I have arrived. And I've arrived now today, but I don't stay there. I'm going someplace right now in 5 minutes.
Well, we're very excited to see how that progress is going to go. And Randy, thank you so much for coming in. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It was good. You're good. I knew you were good when I met you in that goddamn garage. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Randy. Appreciate it.